that 2001 you're getting out there?
Yeah.
So 2001, early 2000s. By this point, your CAT badge had changed, right?
Yeah. No, oh God, we need to do a rewind. So that was the the Royal Army Ordnance Corps became the Royal Logistic Corps in '93. Rather bizarrely, that's when I was helping out the Red Devils. So I'd literally gone up Queen's Avenue, wouldn't be wearing a berry, but I remember coming back to brigade lines and everybody had got a new CAT badge. So, it was, I kind of missed that transition a little bit.
Was it fairly, for someone that's in at that time, was it just no real difference with work? You just carry on?
Yeah, it was just
normal jogging type thing?
Yeah, it was. It was absolutely normal jogging. It was kind of business as usual. At our level, junior NCO level, it didn't matter. He didn't care.
Just didn't CAT badge, like you said.
I'm sure that kind of warrant officer, LE officer areas, they were probably, going through a whole world of pain in terms of rebranding. And for me, it was a breeze.
Yeah. So you mentioned now 2001 out in Gütersloh, Germany. And I know that you went to Exercise Saif Sareea.
Saif Sareea Classic. Yeah,
that was my first time away. I think I've shared this story before. I can't remember if it's on this podcast or on the Patreon aspect. But anyway, I'll share it again.
Yeah, go.
So I'd completed training. I started February of 2000. Got out to Germany. I was in Hamel.
All right.
So that was my first posting.
2-8 engineers?
2-8 engineers.
2-8 engineers,
yeah.
Brilliant.
And so I got out there in the March of 2001 and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to Oman. I was like, oh right, where's that? Now I'm freaking like 18. I'm like a boy.
Brilliant.
And they said, yeah, it's out near Saudi Arabia. All right. Isn't that made up for Aladdin? I didn't know geography. I was a bit dumb. Yeah. But then I was rear party. I ended up, I've never shared this story. I'm going to share it now.
Brilliant. That's great.
Right. A little bit about Gav now. So I'm a new kid on the block. The lot head out to Oman. So they go on to Exercise Saif Sareea 2, which we'll hear your story in a second. So I'm on rear party. Now the sergeant doesn't like me, the one that's dealing with us. There's a short 10 of us maybe. So we go out on the Thursday night. We do have a few bevies. I come in on Friday to do a bit of PT. Then the sergeant says, Watson, you had a few beers last night, didn't you? Yeah, Sarge, yeah, I did, yeah. How many did you have? 2 or 3. Lying. I had at least double figures. He went, right, your punishment, because you're not meant to be drinking on whilst we're rear party, your punishment is to drive down to, I think it was Dortmund, to hand back, it was Dortmund, wasn't it? That big place where you put all your tents and stuff. Uh-huh. You're going to drive them back. Cool, no worries. So I basically end up driving on my own. It's a 3-hour trip, something like that, from Hamel to Dortmund. I think that's about right. 2 hours, let's say, in a Land Rover. Long and short, I ended up crashing.
Wow.
I ended up crashing because I guess, I'm sure we're fine, because I fell asleep. I dozed off and I crashed. Mm-hmm. There was tentage everywhere. Like, I basically rolled the Land Rover. Don't know how I survived.
Wow.
Tentage everywhere, all across the Autobahn. The police come up to me, German police. What happened? I was like, I fell asleep. Okay, I did not hear that. I didn't hear that.
Good lads.
I'm going to come back. You tell me something else. Okay. We clear up the tentage. The vehicle works. We take it into the hard shoulder. We load it back up. The roll bar's through the roof. The back door won't shut. There's no windscreen. The copper then helps me know which route to take. So I get there. And then basically I had to call up, hey, Sarge, I've crashed. So then they sent me out to Oman to save money to pay for all these, all the crash and everything that happened.
Yeah.
And then long and short of it, because I was 6 months into regiment, hadn't been driving for that long, that sergeant shouldn't have sent me on that trip, because I think, it must have been like an hour and a half or something, but a round trip it was 3 hours. And I think more than 3 hours, you meant to have 2 people in the vehicle.
That's right, yeah.
And basically that sergeant didn't need to get in trouble, so they swept under the carpet.
Oh, okay.
But allowed me to go out to Oman to do Exercise Saif Sareea for like 4 months, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, it was about 12 weeks. Did you go from the bottom to the top as well? Did you part of that?
We were in Thumb Rate.
Okay.
So by the time I got out there, they were already set up in Thumb Rate airfield or something. And then, they closed down after the exercise was completed, was down to Salalah.
Yeah.
But where was you based? So sorry, long story about me, but
No, it's super cool. Do you know what's really interesting about Saif Sareea? So Saif Sareea is unique because, like, when you do a rewind, you say to yourself, "Isn't it interesting that in 2001 we decided to do the largest full-scale deployment to a desert environment we've ever done?"
yeah,
And then 2 years later, we decided that we were going to go to war in Iraq.
yeah.
And you go, do you know what? That was either a massive coincidence or somebody knew.
It's odd, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
like 9/11 happened whilst we were out there.
Absolutely, yeah,
Like we
yeah.
were in the desert,
Yeah.
watching the big screens that we had in these
Yeah,
tents, and we were like, "This is a freaking movie."
Yeah.
And yeah,
I don't think anyone could take that in. I don't think back then, I remember that happening and thinking, this is really bad. You know, but then you become a little bit selfish and go, what does it mean to me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What does it mean to me? I'm in the desert, so I just need to focus on the here and now.
yeah.
You know, and I think, like all of us, when we deployed at Saif Sareea, it was a case of, you know, we're going to do a military exercise. We've arrived in a foreign country. We now need to head north. You know, I can't believe that we ended up in the...
And we were allowed to.
Yeah, I can't believe that 2 years later we ended up in the south of Iraq and ended up going north. You know, it was almost like literally somebody had seen the future.
So where was you based then when you were out in Saif Sareea 2?
Well, we started off down the bottom, and then I remember that we did that epic drive all the way up to the top.
Up to Muscat?
Up to Muscat by the end of it.
Because there was that halfway point, wasn't there?
Yeah, we
Big
kind
camp
of...
that we built in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I think we literally skipped that out. So I remember I had a driver, girl called Sam Henty, who I think she's just finished in the army. She was like a young private back then, finished as a warrant officer, one. And Sam was the driver. We had a 2IC called Alex, and the three of us, I remember us being the advance party. So we'd done the bit in the rear. We then did that huge drive north, and then the three of us were living in the desert for about a week to 10 days with nobody.
Really?
Just kind of 7 days, waking up and doing absolutely nothing but kind of sunbathing and and then waiting for the squadron to do its road move into our location.
Okay.
Then we got the squadron into the location, did what we needed to do, and we came back. But rather bizarrely, somewhere in the middle of that, we managed to have a squadron disco in the desert. So our SQMS found, I think, from one of the locals, he bought Christmas tree lights. And then we got all the old cam poles and we made a big 43 squadron set of lights. And we obviously you were only allowed to have 2 cans. So nobody would have been drunk on that particular evening.
Yeah.
But we had quite a nice little celebration in the desert, which was remarked upon by the headquarters about 11 miles away that could hear the music, and led to a little bit of an embarrassing situation with our 2IC at the time. But yeah, I mean, great time.
You just sparked my memory. So when we were out there, we had the first in a long time, I think, the CSC show.
Oh yeah, CSC show, yeah.
And we had Bobby Davro came out.
Yeah.
Steps.
Yeah.
Jerry Halliwell.
Brilliant.
And I remember we saw them after it was an England game, and Beckham scored that free kick to get us into Euros, or I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, would have been
Euros.
So, 2001.
Was it World Cup?
Yeah, I think it was the Euros.
I think it was
then.
Euros.
Yeah.
Crazy. I remember I was on the shoulders of a mate, and beer went everywhere. Yeah, it's quite good actually.
Yeah.
And again, remembering linking it to like what you did before with the special forces. So when 9/11 happened, because we were the engineers down south, we ended up building a separate SF camp.
Okay.
And again, as a youngster, seeing these guys like rocking around, like quad bikes and beards and stuff, you're like you're in awe when you're a youngster. So like you say, your steps earlier on, they kind of like you were your stepping stones for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
And Oman was my beginning of my career.
Yeah.
So it's crazy what those stepping stones can do for you.
No, I mean, we spoke about it briefly at the start, but whatever, whenever you're in the washing machine, as I call it, whether you're in the washing machine, the hurt locker, whatever you want to call it, and you're getting on with it, sometimes there is no way that you ever have that condor moment and pause.
No.
It's years later. It's years later that you look back at it and you go, wow, we actually did that. And then you realise that at the time you just got on with it, but it's had such an impact on your life, And again, everything that I've talked about so far, all of those things now are kind of absolutely, in my DNA. So, yeah, it's cool.
So, final thing from Saif Sareea, anything that stand out for you as a WO2? Because I'm guessing this is your first time really going somewhere as a warrant officer. Would that be
Yeah,
correct?
it was good. Well, I was Sergeant Major.
Oh, you Sergeant Major?
Yeah, I was Sergeant Major. And we'd had, I think we had a changeover of OCs when we were there as well. And I'd got a guy called Pete Smith in as my OC, who was, again, great guy, really good, QGM, great operator, great inspiration, really easy to get on with. And we were, it was a good team. It was a good time to be there. Again, a couple of years there, get written up, Hey, guess what? Just about Iraq's going off. So the Iraq war is imminent. We've been told, me and the OC have been pulled in with the CO, right? Sergeant Major OC. We'll tell the blokes tomorrow, but we're going to war. You're like, okay, great. What does that mean? You're sitting there doing your estimate. And then we started the pre-deployment training, and, the promotion board came out and promoted to WO1. So the CO at the time, a guy called John Grinstead, he was really good. John kind of went, right, listen, nobody's getting posted. You can't pull a Sergeant Major out of a squadron on the brink of war.
Yeah.
So managed to, I say dodge getting promoted, to get out to the to Iraq in 2003. And then once the Iraq war was stabilised, finished, and we'd gone through Telic 1, as was, that was me. I was promoted and posted to WO1.
So I'm going to ask you about this because I just come back from Afghanistan. So I didn't get to go to Telic 1.
Yeah.
So I was in Germany listening to BFBS, as you do. And so was you in Kuwait waiting to go over?
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Oh, it was a little bit, it's really surreal. People talk about war, but I remember we'd gone in, obviously we'd shook out the squadron, and the idea was, the classic, we were, the infantry would make its advances, and hot on its heels, you need to have combat service support, end of story. So we were all harboured up about 10 Ks, the safe side of the Iraqi border, getting the squadron ready, series of low-level training, and then it was, I remember me and Pete having a conversation and saying, right, it looks like it's, we're going in tonight, and the 2IC MAC. And then that was it. They got the call and everybody started to make their advance, and, the rest is history. You can read about it. It was a relatively good progress was made. In the early days, we found them on the retreat. So we were over the border within hours, and then we were literally racing to Shaiba Log Base. And, we did the recce of that logistic base. I remember going in there was about 26 Land Rovers, all of them with a Sergeant Major and a driver in, literally, and we just all powered into Shaiba Log Base, and it was a free-for-all. I literally remember screaming across the thing and going, that'll do. That'll be great for the squadron. A big old aircraft hangar that was in there because it was an Air Force base, I think, back in the day.
Yeah.
And, we shoved the squadron in there, get all the rations in there, get all the ammo in there. The blokes can sleep under their trucks, and that was us. And then we just waited for the war to sort of peter out. And then we were into Basra, and then they started the ruler months. The guys that were in first did a relatively, I think, 4 months, and then they got into 6-month tours.
Yeah.
And that legacy started.
Okay. Crazy that you were at Shaiba, because that's where I went the following year in 2004.
Okay. Yeah.
So, crazy that you went there first.
Yeah.
I mean, most people did, but...
Well, I went back rather bizarrely. So this was the weird bit. So we went into Shaiba and we were like, digging shit pits and there was nothing there, we literally... So we've got all the water for the entire force. So, it's all out there in the desert sun. So every day we'd just disappear off to the pallets, crack a bit of water open, have a nice little shower in the middle of the desert, red hot, the top layer of the water would be like 45 degrees, it'd take the skin off you. But you get a nice hot shower in the middle of the desert and then move on. About 2 years later, when I was a WO1, part of my job was to go back and inspect operational theatres, Iraq, Afghanistan, Canada, Germany, everywhere that the army were deployed outside of UK. And I remember going back to Shaiba Log Base a year, maybe 2 years after the war, and it had completely transformed.
Right.
It was like there was Burger King there and Starbucks and flushing toilets and showers and everything. And I genuinely remember like thinking, right, it shouldn't be like this. It was almost like the being that advanced was wrong, because my memory of it was, it was war, it was raw, it was, sort of pooing in a hole and showering out of a bottle. And to go back and everyone's walking around with a Starbucks was like, this is weird.
Very weird.
An amazing example of how well, we deploy.
Yeah. So you mentioned then being a WO1. So I guess you come back from the war and then say, I'll have a promotion now.
Yeah, well, it sort of worked like that. We had a real balloon knot that was running our MS branch at the time, who was quite an unpleasant character. And I think he knew I wasn't a very technical man. And I think the CEO had upset him by scuppering his plans. So the minute I was available to be posted, he went, right, Gospel, W01, chief instructor at the School of Logistics, which was like the worst job I could have possibly had.
Right.
You know, it's like, don't put me in charge of trade training, you know what I mean? It was just unimaginable. But I ended up coming back here. So now I've left Deep Cut. You know, my last experience of Deep Cut was as a private soldier.
Right.
And I'm now back in Deep Cut
as W01.
As the W01 teaching trade.
So top of OR. So
well, I didn't feel like I was at the top. Yeah, but it was all right. It was good. So yeah, got back up the road there. Only did a year, kind of as the W01 up there, teaching the trade courses, which was nice because you get the next generation coming through. It's you know, it's quite relaxed. And then from there, I moved down to land, and I was down there as the Command Ordnance Warrant Officer, which is like the senior W01 in supplies role within the Army. Okay. So and your job is to look after all those operational theatres.
Right.
So you do the technical governance and the inspecting and
nice.
You know, that side of the job.
Is that down in Andover?
Yeah, well, Wilton.
It was Wilton.
Yeah.
Right,
so
right.
Literally just down the road, but they're now in Andover. Yeah. So.
Okay. So you mentioned about dotting around and inspecting, making sure they're doing their job properly, or things are getting where they should be.
Yeah, you're just doing. I think the engineers have a similar thing. We used to have like logistic support inspections and logistic support technical inspections. So you would just, you know, go out to Canada, Afghan, Iraq. Where else did we have? Kenya, Belize, Brunei, anywhere overseas. And, you know, we just come in as an independent. We're just making sure that whoever's out there doing the accounting is not doing any kind of theft, fraud, misappropriation, you know, sticking to the policy, identifying any problems they've got with the supply chain, you know. So that was the kind of thrust of the job.
Fair enough.
So flitting in and out here and there, you know, nice little. You're getting into desk jobs. That's the thing, you know. When you get to the top of your tree, you're only going to get one shot really at W01. You might be an RSM, great. You'll have a regiment. That regiment might have a really great 2 years, or might have a very static 2 years. So my kind of W01 journey was very much, you know, flitting around all those operational theatres and you know, meeting with people. So.
Did you enjoy that though? Because it wasn't stuck behind a desk. You were going places.
Yeah, no, you know, great gig. Tiring because, you know, you'd be flying out on a Monday to say somewhere like Canada, and on the face of it, everyone's going, well, you're going to Canada for a week. It's like, well, yeah, I kind of am, but, you know, I'm flying out there. I'm going to land. The minute you land, they go, hi, welcome. And then you're running around for 4 days in a strange environment, jet lag, trying to write a report for the gaffer. And then on Friday, you're back. And then you get home and you're knackered all weekend. And then on Monday morning, you go back into land. And of course, there's a whole week's worth of emails that you haven't been able to answer from the rest of the field army, because you are, you know, you're the top W01. Everything's coming into you for, you know, action or approval or guidance. So, you know, you were forever playing catch up. That year flew by, absolutely flew by. And then on the back of that, I commissioned. So,
all right. So after a year of doing that role, is that 2 years in?
Yeah, I don't know.
Rank?
I think I did a year. I did a year as a trade instructor, just over 18 months. And then they selected me to do the command warrant officer's job. And then from that, I commissioned.
Wow.
So that was me. I'm now where are we now? We're kind of getting to 2005.
Okay.
So
you really like, as soon as you can promote, you promote. As soon as you can promote.
Yeah. It was, you know, on reflection, it was fast. I remember being one of the youngest that there was. There was me and a guy called Adam Lloyd. I think Adam's still serving. He's probably a colonel now. He's got to be a colonel in his last 2 years, I would imagine, if he's still in. But I think he and I were probably the two youngest when I commissioned. It has your date in there, your date of birth. And I used to look at my peer group, and they were all significantly older than me, than me and him. So
with that commission, did you know you wanted to go for it, or did someone recommend it and then you thought about it?
Yeah, it's a little bit unusual because it's kind of a natural progression. But I've always found through my whole career, every time they moved me into the next job, I almost felt like I was just competent enough to start the last one. So I remember getting into deep and thinking, I can't teach trade training. I need someone to teach me, you know. It's like, so I had to get my head in the books, work it all out, make sure I knew what I was doing. I was eternally on the back foot. So always under pressure, and just kind of going a bit left of arc. I've realised as I've got older, a lot of my anxiety, you know, and issues that I think we all have, you know, in terms of mental health and how we deal with life per se. When I was under all that pressure, when I was on the back foot, not feeling like a fish out of water and not knowing what was going on, that's when I've been at my greatest.
Right.
And actually, if you put me into an environment where I know exactly what's going on and it's a bit of a DOS, that's when I get really kind of, I'm really uncomfortable with that. So put me into chaos, I'm happy as Larry. Put me into something really safe, I'm really uncomfortable. And again, if we go back to 3 Base Ammunition Depot, it was, far too safe and normal. And actually looking back on that, it's probably one of the, the worst times for me in terms of, how I was feeling. But it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so then commission. So going for it, what does that journey look like? Because like I said, I've never spoken to a W1 going down that road.
Okay. It's changed a lot now. And I think it's changed a lot for the better. I think now the selection process that they go through is it's more of a test. So they're looking at individuals, making sure they've got the qualities and putting them to the test. My generation, when I went through, you weren't tested. It was all on merit. But the interesting thing about the reporting process is, as a soldier, every report you get, they'd go, Gavin has been a really good lance corporal, so he should be a full corporal. So all your reports say that, you've done great as a corporal, so you should be a sergeant. You've done great as a sergeant, so you should be a staff sergeant. When you go to commission, it's totally different. When you're going through that process, my boss at Land, who was General Dannett, as was, and I can't remember who it was before him, but they said, listen, we're not interested in what you've done as a WO1. What we want to see is what you can do as a captain. So you're now not going, you're not telling everyone, so you don't go, well, listen, I can run a 8-minute BFT and I'm really good at this and really good at that, really good at this, so make me a captain. They're asking that question. They're going, when you are a captain, what are you bringing to the table? So I remember my commissioning interview, I had to kind of brainstorm it and say, look, as a captain, I'll be doing this. So I'm now thinking ahead. So my whole mindset is changing. I'm not grafting and then getting a treat at the end of it. I'm actually, telling everybody what I'm going to do before I've even done it. And then they've got to take a gamble on me and offer me that opportunity. So I came off the board, which was really nice. I was in the right job. I was in the right place. I was in the right year. I thought I'd have to wait another year, but I went on first look to captain. And yeah, the transition is a little bit unusual, moving into the officers' mess, the whole process, but you've got an LE fraternity. So you still feel very much like a WO1,
right?
Is like your mindset, and you never really feel like truly a part of the officers' mess. You kind of have this floating period, I think, when you commission. Everyone feels that way.
And then what course do you have to do? So you've been promoted, technically, you've been selected. So before you can wear those pips, what course do you have to do?
I don't know if it's changed now, but for us, we used to go to Sandhurst for 4 weeks. Okay. And you do the late entry officers course, which is classroom based. And right. I remember being on mine. So two things that stand out about mine was when we got on the course on day one, this would have been 2006, which doesn't seem like long ago, but I'm actually aware it's a really long time ago. And I remember on day one, they said, right, we're going to show you how to open PowerPoint and make a slide red and put yellow writing on it and things like this. And it was like, well, I know how to do that. But then the guy who was, no disrespect by any stretch, but, the guy from the infantry, he's kind of, he's trying to eat the computer. You know what I mean? He's kind of going, oh, I need to know how to do this because it's, this isn't what I've been trained to do. You're now taking people that have had a job to do and saying, right, I need to flip you now into this, this experienced officer role with a lot of responsibility, and you need to be able to communicate on paper. Your staff work's got to be good. And, if you've gone through the infantry system or even the corps system, you're looking after men, and now you've got to start to be good at staff work and paper. And a lot of us who come from slightly less educated backgrounds, you're learning everything on the job, And
how did you find 4 weeks at Sandhurst?
Oh, I loved it. Absolutely.
You did love it.
Yeah. Well, I loved it for two reasons. One, geographically, it was up the road. Yeah. So I kind of, I wasn't out of, I was in my own environment. Two other things. Prince William was there at the time.
Oh, he was?
So, okay. He was going through seniors. So it was kind of exciting because we did a lot of shared lectures, and it was kind of, I was thinking, oh, this is cool. I'm on a course and I'm in the same lectures as, like the future king of this country.
Yeah.
And you're in syndicates, and I'm in a syndicate with a PT Corps guy, and he's ex-para as well. And we were all given our projects to do, and literally the instructor, and this is how the airborne network works, I'm afraid, but it's quite funny. My instructor was para reg, again LE officer, and he's going around giving everybody their project to do, and everyone's getting these really obscure wars, and he gets to me and the PT Corps fella, and he goes, right, Gospel, Smith, Arnhem, please. So it's like, thanks, mate. That's really cool. Just literally we can write that before we finish work, and then we'll be on the beer by 7, whereas everyone else was like heads in books trying to research. So by my own admission, I had a pretty easy ride, through the commissioning process.
Nice.
So it's good.
Did you get to Sandhurst, and was you in awe a little bit, because it's obviously a prestigious area of course and education?
Yeah, I mean that is without doubt. I mean, you can take the piss out of officers all day long, right? But there is nowhere better that you're going to get the opportunity to develop your leadership and your command skills. That place is the absolute, it's perfect. Now, I know that, we criticise people when they come out of it and take the piss and all the rest of it, but they have a huge responsibility on their hands. Mm-hmm. And they, whether they have short careers, long careers, everybody who's gone through there is, generally goes on to have a pretty good career, whether it's military or civilian. I really enjoyed it. I think the environment there is incredible. In terms of the facilities, it is utterly professional in every way. There is no degradation in standards. And when you look at the staff that you send there as well, I mean, I've had members of staff that have been there as instructors. And when they say we only put the best in Sandhurst, I look at all those people and you see it. You see staff sergeants that have been at Sandhurst and been instructors, and they're just, they're now half colonels. They're now really talented people that are working in good high-profile jobs on Civvy Street. So undoubtedly that is a phenomenal academy for leadership and command.
And so when you go there, are you wearing the pips already?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
You literally, I mean, the transition is a bit weird, because you kind of, 1 minute you're a WO1 and the WO1 mess dress and everything has the same regalia as the officers, less, I think it was the trousers. So you've kind of already half transitioned, and you just kind of, do you know what? It's relatively easy. Mm-hmm. I mean, you would think, having not done it, that there might be a process to it, but I didn't struggle with it in the slightest. I think where most blokes struggle is changing from the officers' mess mentality to from the sergeant's mess mentality to officers' mess. Right. So, and
then from there, do you get posted somewhere? Or
yeah.
You do. So you knew where you were going before?
Yeah. So again, what happens with the commissioning board normally is they say, right, you've all commissioned, and then the conversation that I had back then, and it was pretty similar. So again, we have up in the military secretariat in Glasgow, you have a lieutenant colonel who's a late entry officer, and he's responsible for all late entry officers in the Corps.
Right.
So he's gone through the process. He's been a soldier, he's been a warrant officer, he's commissioned on captain major, and one of the only jobs, only about 5 or 6 jobs for late lieutenant colonels at LE, and one of them is running the desk at Glasgow. So if he's a really good bloke and you know him, you're going to probably end up where you want to be, or where's a good place for you career-wise. If he's a bit of a balloon knot, then, so I had a balloon knot when I was there, literally turned up there and he went, right, you used to be an instructor at Deep Cut, so take one for the Queen, you're posted to Deep Cut.
Oh, no.
I was like, oh, no, it was all right.
It was all right?
Yeah, it was cool, because I was I was already a WO1, I was already living here, so all I had to do was move house. Well, I think we had a house in Aldershot, and we just literally moved into the officers' patch, and then I was back into the environment I'd left a year earlier,
right.
as the captain.
Okay.
And that was me. It was like, right, take one for the Queen and go and teach, go and now be the officer in charge of trade training rather than the warrant officer in charge of
right.
it.
And I suppose you didn't have that worry that you had initially when you went there as a warrant officer, because you'd already seen it and you've got your head around it.
Not at all. What they tend to do with late entry officers is, when you take that first job, they're not going to set you up to fail. Mm-hmm. So they will put you into a captain's role that is really suited to your skill set. And typically you'll do 2 or 3 jobs as a captain, 2 years before you're even looking at your majority. So your first job will be get your pips on, sort yourself out, find your feet, get used to being a Rodney. And then your next job might be a little bit crunchier. And then that third job, when you're getting into years 5 and 6 as a late entry officer, you're going to be doing a crunchy SO3 type job or a crunchy training or ops job because you're on the brink of becoming a major.
Okay.
And then when you promote to major, it's the same.
Right.
First couple of years, do a nice low level, QM job where you kind of know what you're doing. Your next job will be a command post. And then your next job will be a more crunchy SO2's job. And then you're ripe and prime for potentially going on to a half colonel.
Okay.
But that's time barred. You've got to be a certain age.
Right. So you get to deep cut as a captain.
Yeah.
Was it weird having people salute you?
It drives you get to the stage you actually start to dodge people, and it's a training environment as well. So it's like the worst place in the world because every recruit, hello sir, hello sir, hello sir, and you're like, morning, carry on. You find yourself, it's really weird. You find yourself morphing, right? So for years as a soldier, you walk around and you salute, the officers, and they go, carry on, and then you become a late entry officer and you start to behave like that. I don't know a man that doesn't do it. Soldiers walk past. I've been with mates of mine that I've never heard the words come out of their mouths, and somebody salutes them, they go, carry on, soldier. And they always talk like, the sort of typical officer. It's quite funny to see.
I've got some extra questions now.
Go on.
When you're at Sandhurst, do you get taught how to speak?
Not at all. No, that's all bullshit. No, there is genuinely no pressure on you to articulate or to be more elaborate with your
Maybe
language.
It's different for new officers. An LE might be different, maybe. I don't know.
I know that they used to call it the knife, fork and spoon course.
I was going to say, do you do that?
Yeah, exactly. So pretty much if you've been in the sergeant's mess,
Okay.
you know how to,
Okay.
you know where all the cutlery goes. And to be fair, in the sergeant's mess, most of them are eating with their hands anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, you kind of understand that. You've had a really good introduction to etiquette, manners, and all those. But, there is a bit of you. You do have to go away and do a bit of self-education. So you'll get a lot of the guys will, go and buy the, Debrett's Guide to Etiquette. And, I always joke with people and say, the minute they commission, they go and buy a Volvo, get some cords, check shirt from, crew clothing and start looking the part, It's kind of, but that's all part of the identity. It's all part of the game and the banter and, what you're buying into,
Yeah. So at Deep Cut, you get settled in.
Yeah.
And do you find that 2-year period good?
Yeah, really nice now. I mean, I'm still relatively young. I've got quite a long period of time ahead of me, because I think if you kind of do the years, I think I promoted to W01 when I was 33, maybe 34, something like that. And then I'd commissioned by the time I was 36, 37, I think, just from memory. So I was then thinking, right, by 42 or 43, I'll be looking at my major. And then to get lieutenant colonel, you've got to be 50/51 in reality. So I've gone to Deep Cut. It's a nice environment. It's a safe environment. Everything is going swimmingly. And I just carried on doing the instructor role there. And then the kind of standout moment there was I'd been there about 2 or 3 years. And then in 2009, I took a job as a log support team commander with 3 rifles up in Sangin.
Okay.
So we'd never done this before. We'd
Right.
kind of always had, as I alluded to before, this is a total rewind now because when I was with SF, we had a sergeant who was RLC, so a professional logistician supporting SF. And Hereford had done the same. They'd got rid of their all-arms storemen that were Power Edge, Scots Guards, and bought in loggies. So years later, that concept was being trialled. This idea of professionalising logistics at first line was the paper that was written. It was written during my time at Land. And the idea was that we would put professional logisticians in with first line. So they had to trial the concept. So there was myself, I was a log support team commander, a staff sergeant and a corporal. And we deployed with 3 rifles up in Sangin just to try and enhance and improve, the levels of logistic support. And then on the back of that, subsequent teams went out. And now that is like the Army's doctrine and the way that they conduct themselves. It's now become, standard practice.
So how was it for you out there?
Yeah, that was a proper baptism of fire. They were talking, if you people are watching and if they're not, then they can Google. But, 2009 going into 10 in Afghan, we thought we were going into a quiet winter. Typically the Taliban used to back off, for winter. 2 rifles had been out there during the summer, and they'd had quite a brutal tour. So when 3 got out there in the sort of September time, we thought it'll all back off now, and it didn't. If anything, the Taliban ramped up, and they really went for it during that winter period. So, really hard, really brutal tour, but with people who were at the top of their game. Really, rifles I can't speak highly enough of. Commanding officer at the time was a bit of a legend, and we did the job out there. We set the conditions for the way that future deployments are done. And arguably after that tour, that's when we started to work on our withdrawal strategy and, kind of getting out of there. But, I remember we were living in this house, and for about a week before I deployed, I was down the pub every night.
Right.
I just kept thinking, what am I doing? I'm like 40 years old or whatever. I was just about turned 40 that year. I'm thinking, I'm a 40-year-old man, and I'm now going to be running around Afghanistan, with an infantry battle group, and I just kept thinking, what am I doing, But, a good bunch of guys. Great tour.
Great tour. So coming back from there, do you then get posted elsewhere, moving on to your next role? Or?
Yeah, so came back from that. They kind of put me on a bit of a circuit, I suppose you'd call it, because I've now come back from an operational theatre. I've run, a sort of pioneering trial into logistic support. So everybody that was about to deploy wanted the knowledge, because when you've just returned from theatre, you're fresh, you know exactly what's going on, the AO, the procedures, what's good, what's bad. So for about 6 months, 9 months after that, I was on literally like travelling roadshow everywhere, delivering training to officers at every level, pre-deployment training, soldiers getting ready. And then they didn't know what to do with me. In a nice way. I was only 5 years in as a captain. So in theory, I've got to do another year, and then I'll be looking at promoting, badging, as they call it, coming off the badge list to promote to major. And then they'll find me a job as a major. So I remember the boss got me in, the brigadier at the time, and said, look, you're in between, you've got about another year to go, but what we're going to do is we're going to run you to one of the boards, one of the selection boards, and we'll see how you get on. So they ran me to the command board, and, again, at the time I said, well, okay, you're going to run me to the command board. What are the odds? And they said, well, there's 138 majors and there's 64 jobs. Right. So you've got a 50-50 chance. And I said, well, I haven't got a 50-50 chance because they're all majors that have done 2 years. I'm a captain that's done 5. So I need to do another year as a captain, then 2 years as a major before I'm even on the same playing field as these boys. And they went, no, don't worry about that. We'll still run you to the board because there's jobs on there that favour LEs, like training officer and all the rest of it. So I didn't really think anything of it. I just went, all right, run me to the board then. I thought, well, that won't happen. I'm going to get dicked for another tour somewhere probably, but, who cares? And then like that, phone call comes through, one evening, friend of mine up in the headquarters. Hello, mate. Just thought I'd give you the heads up. You're on the command board list. So you'll promote to major 3 years early. And and you're going to command a squadron. So I was posted to Joint Helicopter Support Unit at Odium.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the time, that job was for a subsequent command. It was tri-service environment. It's quite meaty. And there was another guy on the promotion board who was a lot closer to pinking or getting his half colonel than I. So I politely asked or pulled a favour and said to, the guy that was running our directorate, I said, look, given that he would be far better in that role and I was desperate to go and work at Pirbright, is there any chance of swapping us? And
Really?
He said, well, I'll have a word with him and see what he says. And of course, when it was a guy called Pete, rang Pete up and said, look, this is the deal. You're going to Pirbright as the OC. Gospel's going to Joint Helicopter Support Unit. Would you like to go to Joint Helicopter Support Unit, and Gospel will take your job at Pirbright? Well, Pirbright, not in a disrespectful way, is probably not as good at ticking the boxes working in a Joint Helicopter Unit. So it was better. So Pete took that, and then I ended up down in Pirbright. And now the my legacy, when we talked about legacies earlier, my legacy loop's over now as far as I'm concerned. The minute I got that post in, I thought, that's me, I'm done, 100%, because I walked in the front gates of Deep Cut, in 86, 87, and I'm now in Pirbright, which is the back gate, because the road runs right through the centre. Okay. And I just genuinely remember starting work there. The minute I got that job, I thought, this is me. In 2 years' time, I'm going to walk out the back gate of this place, and that's me. That will be the perfect in the front as a private,
Yeah,
out the back as a
as a
major.
major.
That will do, you know.
Yeah.
So it was good.
Now, I've got a weird question. You mentioned colours of promotion boards.
Yeah.
And I've heard this a few times, especially when
yeah.
I've been like scuba diving and they've been officers and they speak about these. Could you explain it for thick people like me? Not saying you all thick out there, by the way, but I need this explanation.
Yeah.
I haven't done the research. But you mentioned like pink board. Was there a brown board?
Yeah, so you got beige.
Like,
so this is me going back, right? So you had the beige list, which was promotion because you don't really get promoted to captain, right? So you join Sandhurst. If you're a grad, you get to your first working unit, and within a certain time period, they just give you 3 pips. So arguably, nobody really gets promoted to captain. If you're a grad, you get it. If you're a non-grad, you just wait 3 years and somebody will give you 3 pips. So there is no formal, or there wasn't a formal, you are all selected captain. So the first list was the beige list. So beige would get you to major. Then you would pink, and that would be the lieutenant colonel's list. And then you would blue, and that would be the full colonel's list. And then I think you green, and that was the brigadier's list.
okay.
So these were lists that came out, and I think the reason that they were colour coordinated, and one of your viewers may comment on this, but I think it's because back in the day when they used to produce those lists, they came out in a beige book or a blue book or a red book.
Right,
that was the kind of idea behind it. That's my understanding of it.
Okay.
And that's how they were referred to, rather than, it's the majors board or whatever. They were colour coordinated. Probably for the infantry, you couldn't spell beige or something like that.
Fair enough. That's cool. Thank you for answering that. So you're at Pirbright as a major.
Yeah.
Did it feel any different being a major or going there? Yeah.
That
like
was
you said, the other side of the camp.
Have you seen that film, Tom Hanks, Big, where he's basically a boy and he transforms into a man's body, and he goes to work and he's just using a computer and he's a fully grown man, but clearly he's just a little boy inside. He doesn't know what's going on. He's just looking at everybody going, oh, everyone's tapping the keyboard, I'll do the same. And everyone's kind of going, it's a bit weird. That was basically me. That was me most of my career, but certainly at Pirbright, I remember being there and thinking, oh my God, I'm like, I am the OC, all of, those, every OC I've had pretty much has been, I've met a lot of great characters along the way. So when I got in there, I reflecting on it now, I put a huge amount of pressure on myself. I had a sergeant major who was phenomenal, an absolute star of a guy, right? So this guy, I just thought, wow, you're good. You're really good. And Pirbright, they only put the best in there. Right, so I've now got this team of corporals and sergeants, and I'm kind of up here, and I've not been with the troops for a few years because I've been a captain, and I've been around troops, but I've not really been intimate with them, if that makes sense. And every man and woman on my training team, I just remember thinking, he's good, she's good, he's good, he's amazing. Promotion board was a nightmare. You'd be about 20, 30 guys, and you've got bits of paper, and you're going, what do you reckon? You go, well, they're all amazing. They're all fantastic. And what's really special is I left there in 2014, and I've got a picture in the office at work, and it's got all the, predominantly you've got corporals and sergeants on there and a splattering of troop commanders. And literally 2 or 3 days ago, one of the corporals that I done there, a girl called Emily, again, great corporal from the Army Catering Corps, Facebook on Thursday last week, hey, guess what? I've just promoted W01. And that's when you kind of go, I knew you were going to do it. I always knew you were going to do it, but it's really weird when you've been on the journey to see somebody, because she's still one of my full screws.
In your head, right?
My sergeant major, who's now a major down in Aldershot, he's always going to be my sergeant major, because it was that time and space that I met him, that's where he is always in my mind. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to tell you so remember I told you about the guy Smelly?
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm going to get back to the Smelly story because I don't want to lose this one. So Smelly is my OC in Belize, right? And I was BTI, and every day I'd go in his office and he'd go, right, Gospel, what are we doing today? I'd go, all right, boss, we're going to go for a 4-mile run and we're going to finish off by swimming in the lakes. He'd go, yeah, that's great, let's go, Smelly writes on my report, which I've got here. He puts, Private Gospel's been a great bloke. He's run the ammunition section. He's really fit, and I recommend him for para or commando training. And I got that report and went, wow, me? Like, you think I could be a paratrooper? I'm going to do that, And I came back and I put my ticket in for the para course, right? I then don't see Smelly for years, and I'm a captain at Deep Cut. just about to move on to Pirbright, and I'm walking down the corridor, and he comes around the corner. And I'm like, oh, hello, Colonel, because he's promoted now, right? And he goes, hello, Kerry, how are you? And I was like, I'm all right. And he literally just pointed at my rank slide and he goes, oh my God, you've gone 7 ranks in the time I've gone 1. I must be a right tosser. And I said, no, you weren't a tosser. I said, you were a great boss. And he went, oh, thanks, mate. You know, I said, do you know what? I said, back in 89, you wrote me a report. I said, I've got it. I'll bring it in tomorrow. I said, I've got it in my loft. I said, and on there it said, this man should be Parallel Commando. I said, and that was like really inspiring. And he went, I wrote that on everyone's.
No way.
No way. But I mean, clearly you didn't. But it was just kind of flippancy. And it just, the real lesson there is it just shows you that if you're a young man, young woman, and you've joined the military, and somebody who's in command of you, somebody who's in charge of you, they have got a huge responsibility on their shoulders. You can be a section commander, sergeant, warrant officer, whatever, but you might do or say something which will absolutely change somebody's life. Mm-hmm. You know, it's as simple as that. And when I do a rewind and I think, you know, Smelly saying to me, you should be Parallel Commando, Eddie Carroll going, all right, mate, do you want to go skydiving? I'd be like, oh, yeah, you know, all those little things, which at the time it would have been easy to just turn and go a different path. Mm-hmm. They've all, you know, added shape.
Yeah.
And they've all turned out to be incredible. So
yeah, I think you meet those kind of people in all parts of your life, right?
Yeah, totally.
But it's later down the line that you connect with them again and go, do you know, you said this to me? And this happened. So,
and I love it.
Cool.
I love it. I mean, I've again, there's you know, not to name drop or anything, but there's a guy who's one of the brigadiers down in Aldershot, and I think he's running one of the headquarters down there. His father was my boss when I was at 2-3 SAS, and you know, I remember his father saying to me, "Hey, listen, next time you're out in Bosnia, try and find my boy. He's working in the metal factory with the log battalion. He's a young bit of skin, you know, he's a young lieutenant, you know," and sort of meeting this guy, and you know, and then now I've met, you know, Brigadier Patch recently and said, do you know what? Your old man wrote on my report, I was a great sergeant and I should do this. I said, and, you know, just on those words alone, you know, that's where I am today, you know, and the guy doesn't realise that. He's writing reports all day long. So
as a major now at Pirbright, is that where you finalise or finish off your career?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done after Pirbright. And you know what? I looked at it and I thought, it ain't going to get any better. Okay. You know, Dave Finnegan was the desk officer. Dave came to see me when I was there and he said, right, mate, we need to talk about your career. And I went, okay, what are you thinking? And he said, well, you know, you'll leave here and you'll go to an SO2's job and then we'll put you back into command and then you'll pick up another SO2's job and then you'll be 49. So we'll then look at maybe getting you in Sandhurst as one of the instructors. And if you're good enough, that's where you'll pink out of and you'll promote to half colonel. And I went, okay, thanks, Dave, but I'm done. And he went, serious? I said, yeah. And he was literally like, final answer? And I went, honestly, I said, I'm going to sign off. I haven't told anybody. I haven't even discussed it with the wife, but I'm done. I'm going to sign off. So that was me.
How long had you done at that point?
In terms of what, a Pirbright or in the army?
In the army.
It's 20. By then it was about 27 or so, I think, years. Yeah. Just sort of 27 years-ish. So,
how long had you been in Pirbright at that point?
2 years. It's 2 years.
Okay.
I was literally, it was great. So obviously you're taking recruits through training and the absolute pinnacle of that is the pass-off parade, you know, several hundred families, those soldiers starting their lives. It's just the best feeling in the world, wherever you are. It's probably better for corporals and sergeants than it is for sergeant majors and OCs, but it's really special, special moment. And I'd been down there and I thought, right, that's me, I'm done. And the final parade was on, it was literally my very last day in office was the Friday. That was also a pass-off parade. It was also 2 significant birthdays in my family. And my inspecting officer, because you invite a senior officer to be your inspecting officer. So I'd invited, again, somebody who, a woman called Bethan Target, Bethan Canterbury as is now. She was one of the colonels that had commanded me when I was at Deep Cut. And again, you know, really inspirational leader. So again, that absolutely iced that cake. There could not have been, for me, a more perfect end to my military career. I remember grabbing all my bags and walking out of Pirbright and going, that's it. You know, from here on in, it's, you know, I spent 6 or 7 months on resettlement. But, yeah, that was me. I was done. And,
Yeah.
you know.
So as an officer, when you say signing off, do you give the same amount of time as a an OR, an other rank? Is it a year notice, or is it?
Yeah, well, I'd had a conversation, again, I say off the record, but we're on camera, but I'd had a conversation with my desk officer and I was like, Dave, I'm done. And he went, really? I said, yeah, how long will it take me to get out? And he went, mate, if you want out, I'll get you out.
Okay.
And I went, okay. He said, if you want a year, have a year, because that was normal, right?
That's normal,
yeah. You kind of do a year, needs of this, because you've got to be fair. You know, if I'm going to jump ship, they've got to find a replacement. So if I just bugger off, it leaves them empty. I mean, originally, I was posted to DSF, Directorate Special Forces, as the SO2. And I literally said, if that's your plan, don't do it, because I will go there and spend 6 months doing resettlement courses. So that organisation won't have, you know, a warm body filling that role. So put me into some sleepy backwater where nobody's going to miss me, you know, and I'll resettle from there. So.
Okay. So in your last few months, you mentioned about doing a few little courses, but did you have in your head what you will be as a civilian, considering you've not been one since the 80s?
Yeah.
How did that sound?
Now, when I look back at that period, I think I must have been mental, because I didn't have a plan. I just knew the army was over. And then I thought, right, what am I going to do? And whether it was confident or arrogant, I just thought, I'll be all right. You know, worst case, I just thought, I'll do anything. What have I got to do? I've just got to find a few quid and you know, things will be all right. So yeah, I just made that decision. I thought, right, I'm going to go. You know, what am I going to do? And I had no plan, but I knew I needed to be out. And originally I started looking at things like I was going to go into the music industry. I was going to work as I wanted to work as like a tour manager or supporting the music industry. I'd got a civvy mate who was doing that. He kind of said, look, you know, if you do leave the army, I'm sure we can find something for you on, you know, in the music industry. And during the 6 months I was resettling, I popped into London to see him. And then while I was in London, I bumped into another guy that I knew of old. And then he was the one that kind of opened the door for me to employment outside of the army. So I was done. Kind of, you know, at that point, I'd stopped shaving, I'd stopped growing my hair. You know, I was literally just waiting for my date to come round, and then I was done. And when you leave, there was no pomp and ceremony. I literally just remember waking up one morning and going, well, that's it. I'm now not in. You know, there was no, whereas some people leave a unit and get a big send off and a drum roll and everything. We didn't have any of that. I just, when the time came, it was just move away quietly and be done, you know.
Okay. So what year is this that you
2015.
left? 2015.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Beginning, end?
But right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There was other implications, and that's the year that pensions changed. So I don't know if anyone's talked about that
within
in
the military.
Yeah. So up until 2015 in the military, your pension was based on the rank you were when you left. And then from 2015, they amended it and said that it would be on the years that you'd served in the rank when you left.
Right.
So again, financially, I was thinking, well, if I get to colonel, I'll do 2 years. They'll then give me 2/37ths of a colonel's pension. Whereas if I'd been a colonel in 2015, I'd have got out and got got the full colonel's pension.
Right.
So yeah, it was a bit of a transitional period, 2015. I think a lot of people left that year.
Okay. And then, so what was your first few years like as a civvy? You know, you're no longer planning to go to camp. You're no longer going to get promoted in a few years. Your mindset must be really different.
Yeah, it is. It's. I think you're scared, if I'm honest. You know, I think you kind of get out, and I see it now. I see a lot of people leaving and they just grab a job, and it might not be the right job for them. So many people leave and they do the wrong thing. You know, and actually, it's like you get posted to Civvy Street. And then when you're posted to Civvy Street, it's like joining the army. Your first unit, you get there and you're like a nig. You know, you don't know what's going on. You just try and bumble your way through. And after a couple of years on Civvy Street, you realise what it is you want to achieve. So if you look at your army career, your first unit might be great, but actually you as a person are far better in your second, third and fourth unit because you're getting it. So initially when I got out, I went to work in London. I was doing luxury watches and diamonds for a friend of mine, and I was only working part-time, and we had a little office in London, and we just sort of, you know, it was an outlet to the kind of, you know, the football fraternity, executives from big companies, you know, the general sort of the luxurious side of life, as it were. But fundamentally, it was what I was trained to do. It was supply and demand. I was receiving in a watch, paying for it, selling it to somebody was me issuing it. Every now and then I'd check I had all the watches. Every now and then I'd get them serviced. So it was just another commodity. It was really easy. But nobody else was doing it. There was nobody I knew did that. So everybody was kind of a bit, oh my God, how'd you get into that? Like, well, you just got to think, it's only, you're just flogging something.
Yeah.
So.
And then beyond that, what happened? Any others?
Yeah. So what did we do? So did the watches and diamonds for about 5 years, and then I made a conscious decision. I thought, you know what, I'm done with this. It's kind of 5 years is a long posting. I need to move on. So in 2019, I sort of spoke to the guy I was working with and said, look, I think next year I'll move on. And he went, oh, okay, well, if that's how you feel, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I said, but look, I'll crack on. I'll work until August, September, and then it gives you the opportunity to get somebody else in. And then COVID struck. So the minute that COVID struck, we were here, everybody got locked down. So the first thing I did was I went over the road. The hospital is across the road, and kind of went over there and said, you need a hand? Happy to do anything. I'll drive a truck. I'd deliver some meals on wheels, bit of pharmacy work. I don't care. And one of the guys who I'd known of old said to me, my mate works there and he wants to take us on. So they took us on, and we formed part of an operational team that looked after, the logistics planning and the operational planning, and then the logistic delivery for that trust. So that's kind of been my bag for the last 2 years. And then as COVID slowed down, they created a job within the hospital as a Armed Forces Covenant lead. So now I look after all of the veterans that are going through a pathway healthcare-wise.
Okay.
So I've kind of almost gone full circle now. I am a veteran, and my job is to look after veterans that are in the healthcare system.
Right. So what's that linked to, like the NHS? They're going through some medical.
Yeah. So for example, the trust I work at signed up to the Covenant, which says that we will look after the ex-members of the armed forces, make sure they're not disadvantaged. So if you now come into the hospital, they should say, hi, Gav, what's your name? Where'd you live? Have you served in the armed forces? That gets annotated on your patient record, and then I interrogate those patient records and find all the veterans, and then I come and find you and go, hey, Gav, how you doing? I'm Kerry, used to be in the army. How you doing? You go, oh, I'm all right. You go, okay, why are you in here? And I make sure that you're okay, your family's okay. Do you need any additional support from one of the service charities? Do you need any questions answering? Do you just want to have a chat? About bacon butter and a cup of tea. It's that kind of thing. And then I also try and concentrate on veteran members of staff. So trying to get veterans that have left the service into jobs. So if somebody's looking at a job at our place or in any of the NHS trusts around the country, they can reach out to me. I'll go, right, listen, that job you're going for, you're probably going to struggle a bit. Or why are you going for that job? Because you would be, someone like yourself, I'd say you'd be far better working here. Mm-hmm. So, we can prime them, help them with the CV, help them with their interview techniques. And you get ex-servicemen into any sector, and you know this, there's a really good skill set that you've got. And wherever you take that, by and large, will be really appreciated. People, you will always be different. You'll always be different to your civilian counterparts. But all of those life skills and all of these crazy experiences that we all share, they complement that workforce well. Sometimes it's really tough getting in the door because I think we feel like we don't belong there. When in reality we belong anywhere. We're just a bit different, a bit quirky.
Yeah.
So,
have you found it quite rewarding, like connecting with veterans that may be slightly anxious that they're going to hospital and then realise, oh my God, there's someone that knows me in the sense of military mindset?
No, I love it. I'm kind of 4 months into this job. The COVID job that we were doing before, those 2 years flew by, and I did genuinely think, when this ends, that's me. I'm going to, once COVID buggers off, I'm just going to relax, semi-retire, ride my bike. But no, I'm really getting into that now. And, the people that we see there, sadly, nobody's ever in hospital having a good time.
Sure.
So you got to, it's just a case of, well, what can I do to make this person's life a little bit better today? And, like I said, sometimes it's just a chat, and other times it's, getting them a new hearing aid or prosthetic limb. You just never know where they're going to go. So.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. It sounds like you are. And hopefully you continue. And if you're there for another 10 years and I have to have my hips replaced, you'll sort me out.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get you in a little side room, mate. We'll get you upgraded.
Well, that kind of brings us up to date. Was there anything that you missed that you wanted to share with us, or did we cover everything?
Yeah, I think we've covered everything. I think, a very, it's quite a bizarre experience, this, because when you're talking about, there's 3 decades there.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, there's an immense amount in there, but it doesn't really seem like a lot when you skirt over it.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the experience, so thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you enjoy
it's been
going over
unique,
that 3 decades?
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy. I think if, everybody at some point needs to reflect on what they've done in their lives and where they are in their lives. And if you get to a stage where you think, there have been many times throughout my life I've thought, all right, where am I going? What am I actually going to do? And if at that point you think to yourself, I haven't got a clue, or actually it's not a great place that you currently are, it's one thing that's sure as shit, it will get better. Mm-hmm. It will change. You can see anybody in any, whether it's the military or whatever, if you're in a bad time in a unit right now and you're not enjoying it, just hang in there, wait until you're posted, go with a fresh mindset, press the reset button, get into the next job and just see what happens. At some point, you'll meet somebody who will inspire you. At some point, somebody will write something on a bit of paper that will absolutely change your life.
Yeah.
So,
as you had multiple times, right? So
yeah. And, now, at the time I thought that was the gig. And now when I look back on it, I think, no, there were 365 days in that year. And on one of them, this happened. And I've remembered that for life. It's like taking a photograph. It stops time. It influences. It creates a whole new mindset.
Well, I think that's a good bit of advice, which leads us on to this part where you can give some advice for others. So this first part is any advice for people that are thinking of joining the military. Might not be the army, might not even be the UK, but any advice for people thinking of joining the military?
So, first of all, if I had my time again, I would 100% do it. Would I encourage my children to join? Absolutely. All right, because if they don't want to join, that's fine. If they did join, I'd be like, oh, happy days, because I know that actually, if you join the military and you get into that organisation, everything is there for you. Right, you get a lot of soldiers. You see them at all levels, at corporal, warrant officer, officer level. You'll always get soldiers that will have a bit of a whinge and a drip. That's fine, right? You crack on and do that. If you're not happy, you're not happy. Move on. But generally, the opportunities that you have in the military, and certainly my 3 decades, it's only now that I've been a civilian for 7, coming on for 8 years, that even now, I talk to guys, I've got mates now that are serving and they're captains and majors and they always have a good old whinge. And I just sit there with a wry smile going, mate, you're in the best place possible. You're in the middle of one of the best journeys you're ever going to have. It's probably never going to be as good as it is right now. So if you're thinking it's a bit crap, in 4 or 5 years, you'll be looking back at that crap period and going, oh, do you remember? And it will be a very fond memory. So, Oman, for example, right? When we were out in Oman, we've just painted a picture there of, oh my God, you're out in the desert having a really great time. But let's look at the reality of it, right? I was absolutely dripping in sweat all day long. I stunk. I was eating shit food. I was hovering over a shit pit. It wasn't particularly nice. But hey, I've got the fondest memories ever of my time there, So sometimes you just got to, you ain't going to change the wind. You just got to lean into it and get comfortable, And
so you'd recommend joining?
Absolutely, yeah. Wouldn't have it any other way. So
drinking water that was too hot, but you still drank it.
yeah, all of those great things.
Oh, that's good.
So I would just do that. I would just embrace, every opportunity that you get, and don't underestimate just how influential you can be at every single rank. Somewhere along the line, you've pissed somebody off and you've inspired somebody. It's so important to get it right.
Great. Some good advice there. And the next part of advice would be for veterans. Now, this might be people about to transition into civilian life, or veterans that might have been a veteran for a while. Any advice for them?
Yeah, I've kind of, the veteran thing's really close to my heart now, purely because I've gone through the process, so I feel like I'm experienced enough to discuss it. If you'd asked me in the first 3 years when I was flogging watches and diamonds what it's like to be out, I would have told you a completely different story. But I think on reflection, you've got to get used to being out is the first thing. That it's very important to relax into your new role and enjoy it. You have to remember it's going to be nothing like the military, but staying close to that fraternity and that veteran like now me, I gravitated away from the military for about 5 years. I thought, I've done the military now, and I saw it as a bit of a weakness going back and hanging out with military veterans and being part of that. I've completely embraced that now, and I've gone back to like my RLC association, a lot of my colleagues, and I've still maintained them because they were such an integral part. So, you know, the veteran network, if anything, is just going to grow and grow and grow. There's more recognition now for it. You know, the Office of Veteran Affairs and the MPs that have been appointed, the interest and the worries. Veterans are riddled with, you know, skeletal problems, mental health problems. And a lot of that is down to that transitional stress that they've gone through on the mental health side. So keep yourself in good shape, you know, make sure that your head's in a good space. And if it's not, then, you know, get out there and get help. But arguably, the only people that really understand you are going to be those that have had a shared experience. So keep them close. You know, they're going to be your mates for life. Really special. You go to funerals now, and, you know, we can have a funeral for somebody passing away, and the attendance at it is, you know, it's put on Facebook, several hundred people turn up, and it's like the day you left them. Some of these guys you haven't seen for 10, 15, 20 years. Nothing changes. There's not many organisations like that. You go back to a school reunion, it's weird.
Yeah.
You go back to a military reunion, everything just drops.
Yeah.
You know, it's lovely.
Cool. Some good advice there. Well, Kerry, I think that does bring us to the end.
Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you for sharing everything you've gone through. As you mentioned, it was a 3-decade period, but you shared some really good things there. So yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for giving some of your time. We don't have infinite amount of it, and you've given us some for that.
Yeah,
so
it's a pleasure.
Thanks for that.
Okay.
And lastly, I say this to all my guests, thank you for your service.
Okay, well, and thank you for taking the time to come and, you know, do this, because I think what you're doing as well is really important for the community. I found you through, you know, Googling veterans, and then from that I took some of the content and some of the information that those veterans are given and found that commonality and that common ground. So inadvertently, had we not had that conversation, you would never have known that you had given me, you know, a little bit of inspiration or hope. So if you've done it to me, you've probably done it to several hundred others. So, you know, thanks for what you're doing, Gav.
No worries. I'll keep at it. Keep at
mate.
it.
Good.
Thanks, Kerry. It's been great.
Pleasure.
This has been Military Veterans Podcast. Out.